The galaxy was vast, filled with countless stars, planets, and alien species. But in all its infinite expanse, no one had seen anything quite like this. The Zinthar Empire, a dominant force in the galaxy for centuries, had always prided itself on being the most advanced civilization in the cosmos. Their ships, their technology, their weapons, they were unmatched by any known race. Or so they thought. It was on an ordinary patrol of a distant star system that Commander Varric, a seasoned officer of the Zinthar fleet, first received the signal. At first, it was faint, just a whisper among the endless hum of space. But it was, unlike anything he had ever encountered. "Captain, you need to see this," Varric called to his superior. Captain Talara, a no-nonsense leader with decades of experience. She was a figure of strength and discipline, and when Varric was uncertain, he knew she would have the answers. The captain approached Varric's console, narrowing her eyes at the strange readings that flickered on the screen. "I don't like it," she said, her voice cold and calculating. "This signal, it's not one of ours." Varric nodded, his mind already racing. "It's not a distress signal either. It's something new. Something we've never encountered." The signal wasn't coming from any known ship or known species, and it wasn't a simple burst of static either. There was a pattern to it, something deliberate, something intelligent. "We should investigate," Talara decided, her voice firm. "Prepare the fleet. We'll follow the signal to its source." As the Zinthar fleet moved toward the source of the mysterious signal, they found themselves in a part of the galaxy no one had ventured to before. It was a barren, empty stretch of space, void of any habitable planets or stars of interest. There were no signs of other life, only darkness. But then, emerging from the shadows of space, the fleet saw something that stunned them all. At first, it was barely visible, hidden among a field of asteroids. But as they drew closer, the shape became clearer. A massive ship, unlike anything they had ever seen. It was enormous, almost impossibly so, and its design was strange. Nothing like the sleek, aggressive ships of the Zinthar fleet. This ship was blunt, almost square in its shape, with dark, matte surfaces that seemed to absorb the light around it. "What is that?" Varric asked, his voice filled with awe. Captain Talara stared at the ship in silence, her sharp eyes scanning every detail. "I don't know, but we're going to find out." The fleet moved into position, taking a cautious approach. Their ships were battle-ready, their weapons primed, but no one knew what to expect. The mysterious ship was silent, still. It wasn't broadcasting any signals, nor was it making any attempt to communicate. It simply floated in space like a sleeping giant. "What are the readings, Varric?" Talara asked. "There's no life." "Aboard," Varric reported. "No energy signatures. It's lifeless, but the structure is intact. I don't think this is a derelict ship. It's just abandoned, maybe?" Talara thought for a moment, then made a decision. "We board it. Prepare a team and have them ready for anything." Within the hour, a group of elite Zinthar soldiers, equipped with high-tech suits and weapons, was ready to board the mysterious ship. Commander Varric and Captain Talara were among them, eager to discover the secrets of this strange vessel. The shuttle approached the massive ship slowly, its engines humming with quiet power. As it drew closer, the crew could see strange markings, etched into the hull, symbols that seemed to glow faintly despite the lack of energy. They were unlike any language the Zinthar had encountered. "It's alien," Varric muttered under his breath. "We've never seen anything like it." The shuttle docked with the strange vessel, and the boarding party disembarked. They were met with an eerie silence as they stepped into the airlock. The interior of the ship was just as puzzling as its exterior. The walls were smooth, almost organic, and the lighting was dim but present, casting long shadows across the empty hallways. "This place, it feels wrong," Talara said, her voice low. "Stay alert." The soldiers moved through the ship, weapons drawn, scanning every corner for signs of life. But there was nothing. No crew, no signs of any civilization. It was as though the ship had been left in a hurry. And yet the technology was beyond anything the Zinthar had seen before. It was advanced, far more advanced than their own. "What happened here?" Varric whispered, scanning the corridors. "Who built this ship?" They came across a control room, a large open space filled with strange consoles and terminals. Most of the equipment was powered down, but a few screens flickered with static. As Varric approached one of the terminals, a strange symbol appeared on the screen, a symbol that looked almost like a human figure. "Could it be a message?" Varric muttered, trying to interpret the symbol. "But from who?" Before he could continue, the entire ship shook with a violent tremor, knocking the crew off their feet. The lights flickered, and alarms blared to life. Something was happening, something big. "It's the fleet!" Talara shouted. "They've found us!" The Zinthar soldiers rushed to the ship's observation deck, where they saw the approaching alien ships in the distance. But these ships weren't like the ones they had encountered before. They were massive, with black, intimidating silhouettes that stretched across the stars. "Impossible," Varric said, staring at the fleet. "What are they?" Talara's face turned pale. "These ships, they don't belong to any known race, not even the Tawarth or the Arkan." There was no time to process this new threat. The Zinthar fleet had been caught off guard by the strange ship and its inhabitants. Now they were about to face a new enemy, one they had never seen before. Suddenly, a deep, thunderous noise rumbled from the belly of the strange ship. It was the sound of something powering up, and then, without warning, the ship opened fire. The Terran Battleship had been lying in wait, hidden behind an artificial moon, observing the alien fleet's every move. Now, with a single command from Admiral Rourke, the human ship unleashed its fury upon the Zinthar fleet. The first shot came from the Terran ship's massive railguns, the kinetic energy of the blast shaking the very foundations of space. The alien fleet, still unprepared for this sudden assault, was caught off guard. Explosions rocked their ships as the Terran weapons tore through their shields like paper. The humans were no longer silent observers. They were here to make a statement. As the Terran battleship continued its barrage, Captain Talara watched in disbelief. The Zinthar, the galaxy's most powerful empire, had been outgunned. But they were not the only ones who would learn that. Humanity was not to be underestimated. The Terrans had arrived, and they were here to stay. The Zinthar fleet was in chaos. What had seemed like a straightforward exploration had now turned into a desperate fight for survival. Their powerful ships, each more advanced than anything they had ever faced, were being torn apart. The sound of explosions echoed in the cold void of space as the Terran battleship, hidden behind the artificial moon, continued its relentless barrage. The Zinthar had never encountered a force like this before. Inside the command room of the Zinthar flagship, Commander Varric's heart raced. His crew was struggling to maintain control of the ship. The once proud Zinthar fleet, feared and respected throughout the galaxy, was now on the defensive. The ship's hull shook as another blast from the Terran ship tore through their shields, sending sparks and debris flying through the command center. "Report!" Varric demanded, his voice harsh with urgency. The communications officer, a young officer with wide eyes and shaking hands, turned to him. "Commander, our shields are failing. We cannot keep up with their firepower. Our weapons are ineffective." Varric's face tightened with frustration. "This cannot be happening. We are the Zinthar. We do not lose." But the truth was clear. This was not the battle they had prepared for. The Terran battleship was unlike any ship the Zinthar had ever encountered. The humans were not only holding their ground, but doing so with incredible force. At the front of the ship, Captain Talara watched in disbelief as the Terran ship continued to fire, its massive railguns launching shell after shell with deadly accuracy. Each shot seemed to land without fail, and the Zinthar fleet struggled to respond. Talara had seen many battles in her time, but this was different. The humans had caught them completely off guard. "Captain!" Varek shouted, rushing into the control room. "What do we do? We can't hold out much longer." Talara stood silently, her mind racing. Her crew was in danger, and their entire fleet was on the verge of collapse. She had to think quickly. "We need to find out what we're dealing with," she said, her voice steady despite the panic building in the room. "I'll personally lead a recon mission. We need to board their ship, learn what we're up against." "There's no other way." Varek hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Understood. But we don't have much time." The Terran Battleship was closing in on their flagship now, its guns aiming directly at them. The Zinthar flagship had taken too much damage, and their shields were no longer capable of holding off another direct hit. Suddenly, an alert went off. "Captain, the Terran ship is signaling us," the communications officer shouted. It's a direct message." Talara's eyes narrowed. "Put it through." The screen flickered, and the image of an imposing human officer appeared on the screen. He wore a dark uniform, his eyes cold and calculating, his posture rigid with authority. "This is Admiral Rourke of the Terran Empire," the human said in a voice that carried both power and calm. "You have trespassed into Terran space. Your fleet is in violation of our laws, and for that you will answer." The words hung in the air, a weighty declaration. Talara's lips tightened. "We were simply investigating an anomaly. We meant no harm." Admiral Rourke's expression didn't change. "It doesn't matter. You are now at war with us." With that, the screen went dark, and the Terran battleship fired another barrage. This time, the Zinthar flagship's shields shattered completely, and the first few shots pierced through the hull, sending waves of explosions through the ship. Talara felt the shockwave hit her, knocking her to the ground. "Retreat!" she ordered, scrambling to her feet. "All ships, fall back! We need to regroup!" But the damage was already done. The Terran ship had made its point. The Zinthar fleet, once the dominant force in the galaxy, was now forced to retreat in the face of the unexpected might of humanity. Meanwhile, on the Terran battleship Admiral, Rourke stood at the center of his command room, his hands clasped behind his back. As he surveyed the damage reports, the Zinthar fleet was in disarray. Their flagship, the heart of their forces, had been severely damaged, and the other ships were retreating in every direction. "Sir, the Zinthar are retreating," reported Commander Harris, the Terran ship's tactical officer. Rourke nodded, his face calm. "Continue to track them. We won't let them escape. Send a message to the fleet. This is just the beginning." He turned to his comm officer. "Get me the President of the Terran Republic." The comm officer nodded and worked quickly, connecting the call. A moment later, the hologram of President Larson appeared before Rourke. The president was a stern figure, his face weathered by years of political battles. "Admiral Rourke," Larson's voice came through, firm and resolute. "What is the status?" "The Zinthar fleet is retreating, but they're not out of our reach yet. I'll continue to pursue them until we have their full surrender." The president's face remained unreadable. "You've done well, Admiral. But remember, we can't afford a prolonged war. This is not just about defeating the Zinthar. It's about showing the galaxy that humanity is no longer to be underestimated." Rourke met Larson's gaze with a nod. "Understood, sir. We'll send that message loud and clear." The Zinthar fleet's desperate retreat. The Zinthar ships scattered across the dark reaches of space, fleeing in every direction to avoid the relentless human pursuit. Captain Talara's flagship, once a symbol of Zinthar strength, was limping through space, its systems failing one by one. "We've sustained critical damage," the ship's engineer reported, panic creeping into his voice. "We can't outrun them." Talara clenched her fists, her mind whirling with options. The Terrans had struck hard and fast, and they had shown no mercy. Her fleet, the pride of the Zinthar Empire, was now in retreat, outmatched by a force they had never anticipated. Do we have any remaining long-range communication capabilities? Talara asked, her voice steady. Barely, the communications officer replied. But we can send a message, though it might not reach all of our allies. Talara thought for a moment before making her decision. Send a message to the High Council. Tell them we need reinforcements. If we don't act fast, the Terrans will destroy us. The officer nodded and began typing rapidly. Back in the heart of the Terran Battleship, Admiral Rourke watched as the Zinthar ships scattered across the stars, and a rare smile crossed his face. This was only the beginning. Humanity had finally taken its place on the galactic stage, and no one would dare ignore them again. The message. Sent the Zinthar fleet, broken and scattered, had sent a desperate message to their leaders, pleading for help. But as the ships fled into the unknown, the galaxy watched in silence. The Terran Empire had sent a clear message, one that echoed through the stars. The war had just begun, but one thing was certain. Humanity was no longer just a footnote in the history of the galaxy. They had declared their presence, and the galaxy would never be the same. The silence of space was broken by the blaring alarms and the loud hum of engines struggling to stay operational. The Zinthar fleet, which had once been feared across the galaxy, was now in full retreat. Their ships scattered like leaves in the wind, desperate to escape the relentless pursuit of the Terran Battleship. Captain Talara's flagship, once the pride of the fleet, was limping away from the battle, its systems failing, its shields down, and its crew in shock. Inside the bridge of the flagship, Talara stood staring at the view screen, her mind racing. The retreat was necessary. There was no way they could win this battle. The Terrans had shown a level of aggression and power that no one had expected. They weren't just surviving, they were fighting back with everything they had. The Zinthar fleet had been caught completely off guard, and now they were paying the price. We need to regroup, Talara said, her voice steady despite the panic in the air. Send out distress signals to our nearest allies. We need reinforcements. We cannot fight this war alone. The communications officer worked quickly, typing in commands as the ship's alarms blared. Captain, the distress signal has been sent, but we don't know how long it will take for reinforcements to arrive. Talara clenched her fists. Time was running out. The Terrans were relentless, and if they didn't get help soon, the entire fleet would be destroyed. She knew that the Zinthar Empire had many enemies, but none were as organized, as fast, or as deadly as the Terrans. Meanwhile, on the Terran Battleship Admiral, Rourke stood at the center of the command room, his hands clasped behind his back. He watched as the Zinthar ships scattered across the stars, each ship moving in a different direction, all of them trying to escape the crushing power of the Terran Battleship. Sir, the Zinthar fleet is retreating, reported Commander Harris, his voice filled with both awe and concern. They're splitting up. Some are heading toward uncharted sectors, others are trying to outrun us. Rourke remained calm. His mind was already calculating their next move. Track them. We can't let them escape. We need to send a message to the galaxy that the Terrans are no longer to be ignored. He turned to his communications officer. Send a message to the fleet. Inform them that we'll be pursuing the Zinthar. We won't stop until they've been neutralized. The comm officer quickly relayed the message to the rest of the Terran fleet, and Rourke turned his attention back to the view screen. His gaze was focused on the retreating Zinthar ships, their speed nothing compared to the Terran ships' sheer firepower. The Terrans had already made their presence known, and now they would finish what they had started, the Zinthar's desperation back. Aboard the Zinthar flagship, Commander Varric paced back and forth, his mind racing. The situation was dire. The Zinthar fleet was in full retreat, and there was no way they could outmaneuver the Terran battleship. They had been caught off guard, and now they were paying for it. We need a plan, Varric muttered to himself. We can't just run forever. Captain Talara, who had been silent for some time, finally spoke. We'll regroup, Varric. We'll call in reinforcements. Once we have more ships, we'll go on the offensive. Varek shook his head. That may not be enough. The Terrans, they're unlike any enemy we've faced before. We need to understand them if we're going to fight them. Talara's eyes narrowed. I agree, but for now all we can do is retreat and hope for reinforcements. At that moment, an officer rushed into the room, breathing heavily. Captain, we have an incoming message from the High Command. Talara stepped forward, her expression unreadable. Patch it through. The hologram of a Zinthar High Command officer appeared before them. Captain Talara, Commander Varek, report. On your status. Talara straightened. We've been attacked by the Terrans. They've caught us off guard, and we are retreating. We need reinforcements as soon as possible. The officer's face tightened. Understood. You will receive support, but it will take time. In the meantime, you must hold your position. The Zinthar Empire will not tolerate a Terran victory. As the hologram vanished, Varek turned to Talara, his face grim. We can't just hold our position. If we wait for reinforcements, we'll be destroyed. Talara sighed. We have no choice. For now, we regroup and try to survive. The Terrans will not let up, but neither will we. The Terran counterattack back on the Terran Battleship, Admiral Rourke was preparing for the next phase of the mission. The Zinthar fleet was retreating, but the war was far from over. His crew had been working around the clock, analyzing the data from the battle and making adjustments to their tactics. Admiral, Commander Harris said, his voice steady but urgent. The Zinthar fleet is splitting up. They're trying to outrun us, but we can track them. We need to decide whether to pursue the entire fleet or focus on one ship. Rourke glanced at the screen. We pursue the flagship. We send a message to the Zinthar Empire that they are not welcome in our space. Harris nodded, his eyes focused on the screen. Understood, sir. Rourke turned to his weapons officer. Prepare the cannons. We're going after them. As the Terran Battleship turned toward the Zinthar flagship, Rourke's mind was focused on one thing: victory. He knew the Terrans had the power to crush the Zinthar, but it wasn't just about power. It was about sending a message, a deadly chase. The Zinthar flagship, battered and broken, continued its flight through space, desperate to escape the Terran pursuers. Talara and Varek stood at the front of the bridge, watching as their ship struggled to stay ahead of the Terran Battleship. Captain, we're losing speed, the engineer reported, his voice filled with panic. The engines can't take much more strain. Talara's face tightened. We need to hold out long enough for reinforcements. We can't let them catch us. But the Terrans were relentless. The gap between the two ships was closing fast. And soon, the Zinthar flagship would be within range of the Terran cannons. Get ready to fire the rear cannons, Talara ordered, her voice cold with determination. We won't go down without a fight. But just as the Zinthar flagship turned to fire, another blast from the Terran Battleship hit, sending shockwaves through the ship's hull. The Zinthar flagship's shields faltered, and the ship shook violently. Talara was thrown off her feet, but she quickly regained her balance. Return fire! She shouted, but it was too late. The Terrans had already fired again. The Zinthar flagship's rear section exploded, sending debris flying into the void. The ship began to lose control, drifting dangerously toward the edge of the star system. We're done for, Varek said, his voice heavy with defeat. There's nothing we can do. Talara stood silent for a moment, watching the chaos unfold. But even in the face of destruction, she refused to give up. We fight until the very end. As the Terran Battleship continued its assault, the Zinthar flagship's systems failed one by one. The ship was falling apart, and soon there would be nothing left. The Terran victory on the bridge of the Terran Battleship, Admiral Rourke watched as the Zinthar flagship's final moments unfolded on the screen. The alien ship had put up a brave fight, but it was no match for the relentless power of the Terrans. The Zinthar fleet, once feared and powerful, was being destroyed, piece by piece. The Zinthar flagship's engines finally gave out, and the ship went silent. The Terran battleship had won. The Terran fleet had sent a clear message. Humanity would not be ignored. Rourke stood up, his face hard as stone. We've won the first battle, but the war is far from over. The Terran fleet had emerged victorious, but the galaxy was watching, and the Zinthar Empire would not forget this day. The vastness of space was silent once again, but the aftermath of the battle still echoed through the stars. The Zinthar fleet was in retreat, its once proud ships scattered like broken toys across the cosmos. Their flagship, now nothing more than a wreck floating aimlessly in space, was a symbol of their defeat. But even as the Terran battleship loomed victorious, something stirred within the Zinthar fleet. There was still defiance in the hearts of the alien commanders, still a glimmer of hope that they could turn the tide of the war. Captain Talara stood on the bridge of what remained of her flagship, her eyes fixed on the endless expanse of space. The damage to the ship was extensive. Systems were failing, crew members were injured, and the very hull of the ship seemed to groan under the strain of battle. But Talara was not one to give up easily. She had fought for her people for too long to let this defeat be the end. "Commander Varric," she said, her voice low but filled with determination. "We are not finished. Not yet." Varric, standing nearby, looked at her with a mixture of disbelief and admiration. "Captain, we've lost almost everything. The fleet is broken and the Terrans are closing in. What more can we do?" Talara's eyes narrowed as she stared at the fading lights of the Terran battleship in the distance. She was not ready to concede. "We have allies. We have resources. We can still fight. The Zinthar Empire is not weak." Varric hesitated, his face hardening. "You believe they'll help us? After what happened?" Talara turned to him, her gaze steady. "We have no choice. We have to regroup. We have to send a message. The Terrans may have won this battle, but the war is far from over." Meanwhile, on the Terran battleship Admiral, Rourke stood at the center of the command room, his hands clasped behind his back. The room was filled with the soft hum of the ship's systems working flawlessly, the calm after the storm of battle. His fleet had emerged victorious, but Rourke knew that this was only the beginning. The Zinthar Empire had been caught off guard, but they would not remain silent for long. They would regroup, and they would retaliate. "Commander Harris," Rourke called, turning to his tactical officer, "continue to monitor the Zinthar fleet. I want to know where they go, what they plan." Harris nodded, his fingers flying over the control panels. "Aye, sir. The Zinthar fleet is scattering. Some are trying to retreat to the outer sectors. Others are heading deeper into uncharted space." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "They're not done. They will come for us again." He turned to his communications officer. "Send a message to the fleet. We need to stay vigilant. The Zinthar are regrouping. They'll strike when we least expect it." As the officer quickly sent out the orders, Rourke stood silently, contemplating the next phase of the war. Humanity had shown its strength, but it was clear that the Zinthar would not be easily defeated. They would come back, and when they did, the Terrans would be ready. The Zinthar Empire regroups, in the darkness of space, far from the Terrans' prying eyes. The Zinthar fleet was not as scattered as it seemed. Hidden deep within the void, away from the main galactic highways, a shadow fleet had been assembling in secret. For years, the Zinthar Empire had watched as humanity grew stronger, but they had never expected the Terrans to strike so decisively. Now, with their fleet shattered and their pride wounded, the Zinthar High Command had sent their last reserve forces to engage in a counterattack. Commander Zarnak, a veteran of many battles, stood in the command center of the Zinthar's hidden fleet. His face was grim as he watched the holographic map of the galaxy. The Terrans had thrown the first punch, but the Zinthar were not about to back down. "The Terrans think they've won," Zarnak said, his voice cold and full of hatred. "But they have only awakened the true power of the Zinthar Empire. We will strike back, and we will make them regret underestimating us." One of his officers, Lieutenant Chorus spoke up. "Commander, our forces are ready. We can launch a full assault, but we will need to coordinate with the fleet stationed near the outer sectors. Our reinforcements will arrive soon." Zarnak nodded. "Prepare the fleet. We will launch our attack in 2 days. The Terrans may have beaten us this time, but we will show them the true might of the Zinthar." The Terran fleet prepares for the unknown. Back aboard the Terran Battleship, Admiral Rourke was receiving his own reports. His crew was working tirelessly, making repairs and preparing for the next phase of the conflict. Rourke stood by the viewport, staring out at the stars. The battle had been hard fought, but it had been a victory, still. He knew that the Zinthar would not let this go unanswered. "Admiral," Commander Harris said, his voice breaking through Rourke's thoughts, "we've received reports from the front lines. The Zinthar fleet has regrouped. They've launched a new offensive force from a hidden sector. We're tracking them now." Rourke turned sharply, his expression hardening. "How large is their fleet?" Harris's face tightened. "It's significant, sir. They've brought in reinforcements from other sectors. It looks like they're preparing for a large-scale assault." Rourke's jaw clenched. "Prepare our fleet. We need to be ready for anything. The Zinthar are not going to sit idle. We've given them a taste of our power, but now we need to prove we're the ones who control this galaxy." The calm before the storm. In the days that followed, both sides braced for the inevitable clash. The Terrans, with their confidence from the recent victory, fortified their defenses, preparing for a counterattack. The Zinthar, on the other hand, were determined to reclaim their honor. They had lost their first fleet, but they were not finished. They had learned from their mistakes, and now, with their new reinforcements, they were ready to take on the humans once again. Talara stood alone in her quarters aboard the Zinthar flagship, her hands clenched into fists. The ship was silent, now, save for the soft hum of its failing systems. She had watched as the Terrans tore through their fleet with ease, but she was not about to let that be the end. There was a fire in her heart, a burning desire to prove the Zinthar's strength. "To the galaxy. We will not be humiliated," she whispered to herself. "We will rise again." In the distance, across the darkened expanse of space, the Terran fleet prepared for its next move. Admiral Rourke's mind raced with strategies. The Zinthar were coming. But this time, humanity was ready. The galaxy had changed, and no one would ever forget the day the Terrans had shown their might. The message of resolve: the Zinthar fleet had been broken, but not destroyed. Their ships, once filled with arrogance and superiority, now carried a message of defiance. The war was not over. The Terrans may have won the battle, but the Zinthar would never accept defeat. They would strike back, and this time they would be more prepared. The Terrans, however, were not backing down. They had sent a message to the galaxy, a message that said humanity was no longer a species to be overlooked. They had fought. They had won, and they were ready for whatever came next. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the next chapter in this galactic conflict. The galaxy would never be the same, and the war between the Zinthar and the Terrans was far from over. Captain Alex Carter stood at the edge of the observation deck, staring out into the vastness of space. The stars glittered in the distance, each one a beacon of a world that humanity had yet to explore fully. The ship, Seraphis, hummed quietly. Beneath her feet, its engines powered by the latest human technology. Yet, despite their advancements, humanity had been kept on the fringes of galactic affairs. The Galactic Council, a group of powerful alien races, had made it clear that humans were not to be involved in the ongoing wars across the galaxy. For centuries, the humans had been isolated, relegated to the far corners of the galaxy, their participation in the larger conflicts forbidden. Every time the question was raised, the Council would present the same answer. Humans are too emotional, too unpredictable, and too dangerous. Alex's eyes narrowed as she thought back to the last meeting with the Council, where their representatives had once again dismissed humanity's potential. They had argued that the galaxy's balance of power could not afford the chaos that would come from letting humans participate in the wars. Alex, however, had never believed their reasoning. "We're not children," she muttered under her breath. It had been months since the Council's decision, but the sting of their words still burned. Alex wasn't just a captain in the human fleet. She was a patriot, a leader who believed in humanity's right to fight for their place in the galaxy. She knew there was more to it than the Council's claims of humanity's emotional instability. The Scifi was assigned to patrol the outer edges of human space, where the great battles of the galactic wars were never seen. The human colonies, spread out across several distant planets, continued to grow in isolation, far from the conflict that raged between alien species. But it was becoming clear to Alex that their exclusion from the galactic wars was not simply about human nature. There had to be something more, something deeper that the Council wasn't telling them. "Captain, we've received a transmission from the Council," came the voice of Lieutenant Maria Evans from behind Alex. "They're reminding us once again to stay clear of the war zones, no exceptions." Alex turned to face her. Maria's face, usually calm and collected, was tense. The constant reminders were starting to wear on everyone, not just the crew, but the entire human population. "Do they really think we're just going to sit here forever?" Alex asked, her voice steady but laced with frustration. Maria paused, looking at the captain with concern. "They've made their decision. We have to follow their orders. We don't have a choice." Alex felt the weight of those words settle over her. We don't have a choice. That had been the message for far too long. But something inside her told her that humanity had been kept in the dark, that there was something they weren't being told. Something the Council was hiding. "I don't believe that," Alex said, her gaze returning to the stars. "There's more to it than that." Maria stepped closer, placing a hand on Alex's shoulder. "What are you thinking, Captain?" "I'm thinking it's time we find out what the Council is really afraid of," Alex replied, her eyes flashing. "With determination. And I'm going to do it with or without their permission." Back in the command center of the Scifi, Alex gathered her most trusted officers, each one a seasoned veteran who had followed her through countless missions. She trusted them with her life, and now she needed their loyalty more than ever. "All right, people," Alex began, her voice cutting through the hum of the ship's command center. "The Council thinks we're not ready. They think we can't handle the wars happening across the galaxy. But I don't believe that. I think there's something else going on, and I'm going to find out what it is. I'm asking for your help." Lieutenant Evans stepped forward. "You know we're with you, Captain, but if the Council finds out, we're already on their radar," Alex interrupted. "Every time they send a message, it's another reminder that they think we're too dangerous to be involved. But they're hiding something, Maria. I can feel it." "Have you considered the possibility that they might be right?" Lieutenant Marcus Jensen asked, his voice low and cautious. "That we're not ready for this?" Alex turned to him, her expression firm. "We won't know until we try, and I believe in our people. We've got the technology, the courage, and the will. What we don't have is the truth." There was a brief silence as the officers exchanged glances. Finally, Lieutenant Jensen nodded. "Then let's go get it," he said, a slight smile on his face. The decision was made. The Scifi would head deeper into uncharted space, beyond the boundaries set by the Council. There were rumors of an ancient human archive, one hidden from the rest of the galaxy. Alex believed that if they could find it, they might uncover the answers they were searching for. The journey wouldn't be easy. There were dangers in the unknown, and the Council's patrol ships were always lurking. But Alex wasn't afraid. She had lived through enough battles to know that the greatest challenge wasn't the enemy you could see, it was the enemy hiding in the shadows, waiting to strike. As the Scifi left its orbit and headed toward the unknown, Alex's thoughts turned to the future. If they could uncover the truth, humanity could finally take its rightful place among the stars. It wasn't just about fighting wars, it was about securing their future, a future that the Council seemed determined to deny them. "Captain," Maria said from the communications panel, breaking Alex's reverie, "we've just entered the coordinates for the archive. It's going to take us a few weeks to get there." Alex nodded. "We'll be ready. Keep scanning the area for any signs of the Council. If they catch wind of what we're doing, we'll need to be prepared." The crew worked in unison, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of control panels. They knew the risks, but they also knew that this was a mission that could change everything. Days passed, and the Seraphis made its way through the uncharted space, leaving behind the safety of the human colonies. The vast emptiness of space stretched out before them, a cold reminder of how isolated humanity had become. Yet there was a sense of excitement among the crew, a feeling that they were on the verge of discovering something monumental. One evening, as Alex stood alone in the observation deck again, she couldn't help but wonder if they were making a mistake. But she quickly shook off the doubt. She had a duty to her people, and the truth was out there. They would find it, no matter the cost. As the ship continued its journey, the feeling that they were being watched began to settle in. It was subtle at first. Small glitches in the ship's systems, a strange distortion in the communications channels. Alex pushed these concerns aside, focusing on the mission. But deep down, she knew that the further they ventured into the unknown, the more dangerous their journey would become. "We're in this together," she whispered to herself, looking out at the stars. "No matter what we find,